Hi everyone, Brian here. I am at the northern end of our river trail. It's right off of the D&L trail, and it goes down along the Lehigh in what we would call a riparian zone or a riparian buffer zone. Now, we just had a lot of rain the other day, and our river trail has been affected by it, but that's actually a good thing because a riparian buffer is what actually protects us from heavy rain, from flooding. Also, an added benefit to a healthy riparian buffer is it prevents a lot of pollution from actually going into the river. One of the things we can do to help maintain a healthy, safe, freshwater resource like the river right behind me is to maintain a healthy riparian zone. So, I'm going to enter in here at this northern portion of the trail and come out on the southern portion over by where our ponds actually are. And the ponds are very full from all of that rain, and some of the water is coming down through some springs, and you're gonna see some action along our boardwalk and also why we installed it. So come along with me. I'm gonna take us for a walk down here, and we're gonna see what's up, what's blooming, what's growing, what's flowering. Maybe see some wildlife. No guarantees on that one, but plants are just as cool. So why don't you come along with me and let's check it out. Now, as you can see, the vegetation is getting thicker. There's a lot more of it. In the summer, this trail is actually quite cool. A little bit humid, maybe a little buggy. There's nothing wrong with it being buggy. I happen to really love insects. But it is a little bit cooler down here. You're near the water, and it's pretty well shaded. Now, as we move along, you see what we have growing here and what I can identify. I do have a love for plants. However, I am not the best with actually identifying all of them. I am good at some, so we'll see if we can put my knowledge to the test. It is still kind of like early spring, so there's not a whole lot coming up just yet. However, we may come across a couple gems that like to get a head start on the growing season. And it just so happens that I am standing next to a very interesting plant, one of the little gems we have growing down here. It's called Trout Lily. It's a huge patch. I am going to start from this end and walk on down. And yes, all of that green in front of me is Trout Lily. Why don't we take a closer look? Okay, now this is the perfect habitat for Trout Lily. It loves this type of environment. It loves to grow here in this area. Shaded, a lot of water, a lot of drainage, really rich soil, which is provided by the trees and all the leaves falling and composting. Trout Lily, if you can't find a flower, has this very identifiable leaf. They're very close to the ground. They don't grow very tall at all. In fact, the only part of the plant that grows up above is the flower itself. Now, the flowers are a little bit closed right now. We did have some pretty cold weather last night. It went down below freezing. In fact, there were some frost warnings, but it does produce a very nice flower. Now, an interesting thing about Trout Lily is it is a bulb. Yes, a bulb, just like tulips, daffodils, hyacinths. However, what makes this a special bulb that kind of sets it above the others is that it's native to our area. Bulbs, believe it or not, are not native to Pennsylvania. We only have this one that I know of that has lived here for thousands of years and is considered to be native to our area, Pennsylvania, maybe even the mid-Atlantic region. Now, the cool thing about these is that their root mass, their bulb itself, is actually about 10 inches below the ground. So below the surface of this soil, 10 inches down, the bulb will be. So they are very, very hard to propagate if you ever wanted to add these to your garden. And I would not recommend you go digging up our Trout Lilies to add them to your garden. You can find them at nurseries if you wish to add them to your native plant gardens at home or your habitat gardens. Another interesting little fact about the Trout Lily is that their seeds are dispersed by ants. maybe that has a little something to do with the fact that their bulbs are 10 inches below the surface of the soil. But yes, their vector for seed dispersal are ants. But if you ever do decide to propagate these in your garden, I want to warn you, it will take years until you get a plant mature enough to flower. Yes, it takes years. I'm not sure the exact number, but I would say probably, from what I remember, from what I've heard, 3 to 5 years for one of these plants to mature to be able to flower. Now, as you can see, when it finds an area that it loves, it takes off and it grows like crazy. There are other patches along this trail that I know of, but this is the biggest one that I can think of and the one with the most flowers. So we're gonna move on right now and see what else we can find along this trail. But yes, Trout Lily, a native bulb to Pennsylvania. All right, so as we walk along here, you're gonna see some sections that look like they were a bit inundated with water. Well, that is the whole point, actually, of our river trail, or I should say a riparian zone. In fact, if you see, these trees are actually submerged at the moment. Don't worry, it will not harm them at all. Those are river birches. And river birches are, just like their name states, right here at home in a riparian zone. They actually like to get submerged in water. So long as, it's well drained and the water does recede eventually, but for a short inundation, it is not a problem for the river birch at all. They're fast growing, they grow prolifically, they can be multi-stemmed, they are well suited for an environment where they are going to be receiving a lot of environmental changes and physical changes to where they grow. Some are getting knocked over and then they still manage to push out new leaves each year. They are a very hardy tree for this environment, and they are a very key component or species for a riparian zone. All right, let's move on a little bit further here, see what else we can find. See what I mean by multi-stemmed? That is technically, I guess, one tree, but it had probably suffered some sort of trauma back in the past, and now it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaders growing out of it. Okay. We get a lot of plant life that comes up at different times of the year down here on this river. One of the problems, though, that we have in our riparian zone, on our river trail, is this particular plant here. It is not a good plant. It is an invasive species. It is what we would call a weed. It is called garlic mustard. When you crush up the leaves and you smell them, yes, they do kind of smell like a combination of garlic and mustard. And they are edible, believe it or not. They were probably brought over here as maybe a supplement for food, as a seasoning. Who knows? Doesn't smell as bad as the skunk cabbage that Ian had put his nose up to. I wouldn't recommend doing that. Take our word for it. Skunk cabbage has that name for a reason. Garlic mustard, on the other hand, though, if you like garlic, you like mustard, it's not a big problem. However, like I said, it is invasive. Now, what you'll notice with garlic mustard is it will start to put out these tiny little dainty flowers. So it is now budding, and it is in its flowering growth state. So what will happen to this plant is it won't be low growing like this anymore. It will actually grow a lot taller, and you'll see all these little white flowers starting to form at the top. If you want to pull these and do any kind of invasive control, I would recommend you pull them out sometime before they go to seed. Because by the time they go to seed, it's actually a little bit too late, because then you're just going to have more garlic mustard popping up elsewhere in your area. Is it a bad thing to pull after they've gone to seed? Not necessarily, but if you want to be most effective in your work and you don't want to do a lot of work for no reason, I would say pull them now, or at least when they're flowering before they go to seed. So, while we're on the topic of invasives, here we have lesser celandine. Beautiful little yellow flower, likes a shaded area. This is the perfect habitat for it. It can be quite prolific. It can grow it's a hardy plant, and that is what makes it invasive. So it's another one. It's beautiful, it's pretty. If you can control it, cool, you can leave it go. But I would also suggest, if you want to have a native plant garden or a habitat garden, I would suggest removing them. Zoom in a little bit on this so you can see what the flowers and the foliage looks like, so that way you can help identify it in your yards or properties at home. So all right, let's move on a little bit further. Let's see what we got. Oh, the trail is getting a little bit muddy and a little bit wet, but that's okay. It's not such necessarily a bad thing to get muddy. All right, what else do we have popping up along this trail? Oh, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about this thing. Is that a woolly mammoth's trunk? Is that the Snuffleupagus' trunk? No, it is not. Does anybody know what that is at home? Hairy vine, scary vine, as Chad would say, and a little rhyme that actually helps me now with identifying it. You might also have heard the rhyme, leaves of three, leave it be. Yes, folks, that is poison ivy. And this is a very healthy patch of poison ivy here. It's a vine. It does what it does. It grows up a tree all the way up, wraps around, and those branches coming off are in fact poison ivy branches. How can you tell when there's no foliage to go by for identification? Well, you go by this characteristic hairy vine. And believe it or not, is native to Pennsylvania. It's native to our region, and it's actually a pretty important plant. See, the berries are eaten by birds. It's actually a pretty important food source. Not necessarily good news for us because, well, what do the birds usually do? They are the seed dispersal vector for this particular plant, in that they eat the berries, they can't digest the seeds, and when they poop, well, they deposit those seeds elsewhere, and then you end up with another poison ivy vine growing somewhere else in the woods. So yeah, no, we don't really work to eradicate it unless it becomes a major problem and we have like a health hazard here where people are going to get poison ivy just from walking on our trails. Now you can see efforts have been taken to control this particular vine, or these two particular vines, because they have been getting to a point where they are becoming a problem and a hazard to our trail. So be on the lookout for poison ivy. It can ruin a good part of your summer. You may not even get a reaction or have a reaction within a couple days. It might take a week, but it will, depending on how bad it is, make for some pretty uncomfortable times in the future for you. And they usually do last a couple weeks. So all right, once again, a nice little flooded area, river birch, loving it. Skunk cabbage popping up. This river trail, this riparian zone, is also habitat for a lot of different birds. So here's a yellow warbler, red-winged blackbirds like it down here, Baltimore orioles. So there are plenty of points of interest along this trail to make it a new experience for you almost every time you come down here throughout the year, whether it be the winter and the huge ice jams, providing they haven't actually come up and blocked our trail, to fall with the foliage, bird migration, to spring, birds migrating back in, or even the occasional black bear that may come down through here to cross the river, which I have seen, and I have also seen the tracks from. So, like I said, the Baltimore oriole. Now, this is the part of our trail that gets washed out and inundated with water, mud, and all the fun things that everybody loves when they go hiking. I have waterproof shoes on, but there's holes in them now, so they're not really going to do me much good. So I'm really glad that someone put this boardwalk in. Now, as we walk along this boardwalk, you're going to see a lot of vegetation start to get greener and thicker. And that is where the swampy section actually is. I mean, it's swampy during the entire length of this boardwalk. However, it's really particularly bad in this area where the spring actually opened up behind that bench. So now we have skunk cabbage, just loving life here. Lots of water. And there were a lot of people jokingly complaining that they always got muddy shoes, and we made them walk through here on our field trips as we explored the river trail. So we decided it would probably be best, with the help of a grant from Lehigh Valley Greenways, to put in a boardwalk. Now, as I walk along here, notice my feet are not in the mud and I'm not getting wet. So let's see what we have growing here besides the skunk cabbage. Unfortunately, the skunk cabbage has already flowered, but you'll see right here another nice little patch. Can you remember what I was talking about when we were beginning our hike? The first plant I focused on? Yes, Trout Lily. And another spot in this area right here along this spring that I'm gonna have to now cross is this flower. This is one of my favorites. This is Trillium. Oh, the flowers are fully open now and actually quite beautiful. I have Trillium in my gardens at home. It's actually a selection, so it has like mottled leaves, but Trillium is native. Mine is native as well. They have these very, very beautiful flowers. See, Trillium is a very sensitive plant, and it also happens to be a favorite food source for a lot of browsers. So you gotta, if you're gonna plant this in your garden, your habitat garden at home, be sure to rabbit-proof them somehow, because until you get an established clump of it like this, they are gonna get eaten by rabbits, by deer, any kind of browsing animals that we have in our area. Now, a couple cool little facts about Trillium, aside from it being a very special plant to find, very special. They are actually kind of delicate and pretty rare. They are pollinated by flies. Yes, a flower as beautiful as this is pollinated by flies. Pretty interesting, right? I mean, I'm sure the plant itself would be very happy to accept the pollination services from any other kind of pollinator, like a beetle or a bee, but it just so happens that they have evolved to attract flies for their particular brand of pollination. So this is a very nice find to have along our river trail here, and it is doing very, very well. It loves this environment. Right along a stream, pretty wet, shaded, very fertile soil, nice habitat. Now, here we go. When you come along our river trail, there is going to be a little need for some dexterity in crossing these streams or springs. So I'm going to be very careful, watch my step, make my way across, show you all a nice big patch of skunk cabbage, make our way through here. And some poison ivy in there. I actually had to clear this trail a little bit. There was some debris, but hey, like I said, riparian buffers being riparian buffers or zones, I was very happy to do so because it was doing its job. Now, when you get to this portion, the southern portion of our trail, you're gonna notice that there are actually steps put in here. Pretty nice, huh? So we're gonna go up these steps. And we are going to come right back out on the DNL. And right on the other side of those rocks is our pond, and there is our tannery. Well, folks, I hope you liked my little guided tour of our river trail. I'm going to be doing some more of other trails on our property. I'm going to highlight some other plant species that grow, depending on the time of the year and when they're popping up. I'll even take us for a little virtual walk through our habitat garden. But this was the beginning, our river trail. A lot of things start to actually bloom and pop up earlier in the spring in that habitat than a lot of other places. Although now at this point in time, being mid-April and having had a really mild winter, yeah, a lot of things are actually starting to show up a little bit earlier in some cases. So, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again next time for another walk.